Flammy flame. Yeah. Let's get it.
Flam's the city, home of the flam bake. Are we recording? Hello, the Sonic City Council is now in session. Thank you once again for inviting us into your home. And now it's time for another round table version of the podcast. Call this meeting to order. Call this, yeah, I was gonna say,
right.
yeah.
Everybody's respectful of the gavel. Okay.
I have my moments.
This episode is sponsored by Google AI, right?
Yeah. It's sponsored by Google AI. It's sponsored by what other evil, ominous AIs out there?
Skynet.
Hey, Google, what time is it?
Monster.com? I don't know.
Oh.
What was the one we said before? Something.biz.
What time is it? Google, what time is it?
Google's.
Why is this happening?
1 p.m.
Google's always with me.
Yeah, once you scream at that bitch a couple times.
Now that the audience knows when we're taping.
Yeah. Well, and now that now that they clearly know exactly what our theme is, we can begin to discuss this.
Relationships.
The stylings of Miles Davis, right?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Celibacy.
So recently, this was at no
No one's here.
no. My bad. No.
All right, continue.
So, I think this was at the beginning of the year, January this year. There was a EP that was released that was done by.
Oh no!
Yeah, yeah, I know. Another EP, just what the world needed. It was done by
Extended play.
Yeah, extended play. That's longer than a single, but shorter than an LP, a long play. So
That's what I thought.
I was gonna say, not. I got some technical industry jargon,
I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if anybody looks like they have some jargon, it's you with the hat and the suit coat.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah, you're the most official person. You're representing all of us. You're
Let me represent you.
You're the official. you're the official attorney of the Sonic City Council.
Yeah.
So it was called the Lost Tapes of the 27 Club, and it was basically a AI-generated EP. So all of the lyrics, music, like chord changes, melodies, hooks, all that arrangement. Actually, the arrangement wasn't done by the AI, but the whole music was composed by this AI algorithm, like created by Google AI. It's called Magenta, I think is the program. And it was basically commissioned, or the idea came across because there was some charity called Over the Bridge, which is a musicians' mental health charity wellness organization.
Shut it down.
Yeah, that's trying to
Or change the name.
yeah, they're trying to promote like that musicians have mental health issues and that like musicians struggle, and so they're
So let the robots do it.
right, fucking right, dude. Like, so, for those of you that aren't aware, Google Lost Tapes of the 27 Club. You'll find all the press releases on it, and that was their aim. And so, an audio engineer, I don't know who it was, but like, took all of the music and MIDI files that the AI wrote based on. They did Nirvana, Jimi Hendrix, Amy Winehouse, and The Doors, and they took a bunch of all of that music and put it in the computer via MIDI files, like basically Doors music, Jimi Hendrix music, and then they made chord changes, melodies, and hooks and all of that through the algorithm, and then they had an audio engineer cut it up to where it made sense, and then they brought in a singer for each song to actually like sing the AI lyrics. So my question today is, when do you want to get the bunker going, and then when do you want to start gathering up large stockpiles of food? Well, seriously, though, I'd like to know, because there's a whole thing, like AI music's been around for a while, which I didn't really know the whole rabbit hole of how deep that goes until like just searching AI-generated music, and there's a shit ton of it out there. So I'm completely against it. You're like absolutely for it. But
Not necessarily AI-generated music, but I like AI. I really do. I like the convenience of stuff getting done for me, or what I'm doing just being made easier.
Yeah. So I guess it is like, where do you see AI taking music, and then how does that have an impact on society? And then are you for this, against it? I want to get everybody's feel on like where they stand on the robot doom that is coming over the horizon.
All right, who's angriest about this?
Probably.
The old man screaming at the cloud right here.
Yeah. On that note, you got any thoughts?
I mean, I'm all for it.
I've got two.
All right.
Honestly, I'd love to
Alright.
see where it goes because, like, at this point, it's still mostly humans making it,
Right now. Right now.
and it's still
Right now.
mostly humans making money off of it. If there's any money to be made. The point.
Imagine a hit song being made by AI and it's just raking in millions of dollars, but nobody knows
Look at
who
all
to
this
give the
money
money
I've
to
made.
because the AI made it, and it's like,
Well, that's actually a really interesting point, because if that does occur where something is entirely written by an AI, composed,
they get the
edited,
rights.
arranged, who do the rights go to?
The
Right.
Who's
developers
gonna say
of the
that
AI?
the AI? So, okay, first of all, you're talking about something that's going to take AI a long time, because now you're talking about AI that has such a wide net of parameters in its functionality that not only can it write the song, but it also can take care of its own
Right.
fucking music writing and publishing credits.
Well, and
Like,
also,
if a human signs it up for ASCAP, like, here's my thing. It's like you always have to delineate. Like, the AI may be doing one function on its own, but until it's untethered from humans and really autonomous, I don't think it's really anything to worry about.
Well,
I
AI
think it's
Johnson gets a lot of plays in Japan.
Well, I guess I mean that
there's
more
so
in
much
the
to be
sense
said
that,
about what gets a lot of plays.
I mean that more in the sense of, well, in that situation, do the rights end up defaulting to whoever built the neural engine, right? So whoever
what
basically fed the algorithm or the neural net with all of the information that compiles it into the composition, does that person receive the rights to the music?
If the Google AI Magenta did everything,
Rabbit hole fast.
you better believe Google is making
Sure.
all that money.
Yeah,
right.
that's
Well,
what I would assume.
And with this, if I have my facts straight on it, they're not selling these songs. It's like we're posting this on streaming services. So that's not an issue really yet, because it's not a matter of like this got a bunch of downloads or necessarily plays. If like any of these songs like got a ton of fucking streams, then that's also another story, and that's another rights issue. But I would take a step back even further.
No, you're right.
And then this will be the first time that AI has
Contact
been
music.
assigned rights, if that's the case.
Yeah.
So then that's, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised in the next 5 to 10 years that there's people advocating for giving fucking, I'm just going to call them robots because it's funnier that way, even though it's not robots.
Yeah, it's
Giving
robots.
robots like human rights, whether it's an algorithm
I mean,
or,
we do it for corporations right now.
Yeah,
Who's
I
to
don't like
say
that either.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cases that could be made for that too.
Yeah.
I guess there's also the question of, well, if you have a neural net that's compiling basically source data to create these compositions, when you're dealing with human beings, you can't really empirically track where, when, and what people are sourcing inspiration from. Like, you can hear it
Right.
sometimes if people want to make that apparent in a track, but when you're dealing with something like a tool that's essentially gathering data and trying to sort out all of the different parameters that make something either attractive sounding or that scores, I guess, high enough points that the algorithm deems it a good musical choice, do we then have to cross-reference against all the data that's being compiled by that engine and distribute, monies and earnings to the people whose material that's sourced from?
Right.
Well, of
I'm
course.
going to say no.
I would say no too, but
Just because
I would
we
wonder.
don't do that with songs now, even if they go to court.
I
for
guess I mean that
copyright
it
claims.
could be such that there could be legislation put in place that because the algorithms work that way and they do have to source material in that way, you could make a case for, just like how people are now starting to push back against data gathering, right? Data mining. And, there's a claim that people should be entitled to monies for that, which I'm on that side that believes that they should. So I guess you really could say the same thing about something that's built off of a wealth of source material that can be cited. So there could very easily be a situation in which you would need to acquire permissions to do that.
Yeah.
Which I think would be fairly obvious that will be the case.
Right.
And because people will have to jump through those hoops to accomplish that, I have to assume that it's a point in the exchange at which money can be made from that exchange, so I have to assume that it will.
I guess at which point?
No, go ahead.
I guess like you have to think of like, okay, when it gets there, and we figure out like, oh, we need this legislation or something. Will it have already sourced millions upon millions of different songs and artists to where it's like there's no way to be able to separate that and
Yeah. I think that's the kind of thing that will probably become an issue later on down the line. Like early on, there's going to be all of these practices and early adoption techniques that people are going to default to because, I mean, predictably, the legislation is going to be at least 20 years behind the development of the technology.
as it is with current music.
Yeah.
Usually.
Slam!
So I think if
Maxwell slamming the beltway.
Yeah. I think if we get to the point where, say, you have entire labels and distributors that are essentially licensing their entire catalogs to that stuff, I think that becomes a lot more pertinent. As opposed to like a small company maybe licensing a select amount of songs to do that.
It's so
I'll do
funny
this
because well, as your attorney, I must
Yes.
advise you to veer off this course of action, and we're gonna have to shut this interview down. I think the funny thing is like maybe I'm jumping ahead of things, but I feel like all of the technological ramifications, it all comes down to like, look, if there's an economy and a concern around that and legislation, all of that will be concerned around the human interest. So it's like, it's all a reflection of us and our fucking egos. That being said, so I think that it's all a moot point in the end because we're the engine that would drive it. It's like if everyone's repulsed, like the Uncanny Valley scenario, and if you don't know what that is, then you're not as nerdy as us, okay? Everybody know Uncanny Valley? It's like when the robots don't like look human enough when they talk so that you hate them.
Right.
Yeah.
It's where they make all the stuff up north, right, in the Uncanny Valley.
That's what they call it now, but it was
Yeah.
first determined that it was like in this paper about like, robotics and like people interacting. with
Yeah,
robots
no,
and
I
stuff.
know the term. I'm just
just
inserting a
figure
bad
it
joke as usual.
Get it in there, Pops. Get it in there. But so, what was I going to say? On a technical level, I think that you should treat anything that the AI composes separately, at least for a while. And the reason is because it's not being derived the same way that humans composing music. And I don't see how you could treat it the same way. Because literally, I went and watched a bunch of AI like music and the stuff like the guy who like
Yeah,
so there's
me
like
too.
the AI that's like made a third movement for Schubert's Unfinished Symphony or whatever, and all this stuff. But I'm like, at the end of the day, what's really happening is it listened to a bunch of fucking Schubert and it listened a lot to like the first two movements over and over and says, oh, okay, so X amount of times he uses a B flat. So a B flat, and then it's, calculating, oh, okay, well, if the preceding note was an eighth note, that B flat should be like a dotted something. And that makes it Schubertian. That's garbage. Like, it's churning out stuff that sounds musical, but it's completely without the human representation. So I'm kind of like, what's to worry about?
For now.
But you're worried about, like, them taking over and, like, you're going to have to be, like, a robot sex
Well,
slave.
I look at it like this, right? Human beings, the way we evolved, the first step. It's like a Rick and Morty dream sequence, except with AI, and Terminators, and lots of unfortunate activity.
Gosh, yeah. Hodgkins go to 10 delete.
Just imagine Jesse getting tied up while the T-1000's just like...
Well, that's the worst because that hand could be anything. If you're following the Terminator folklore of what the T-1000 is capable of.
Actually, you get kind of attachment.
Jesse's just terrified of all robots.
Oh, it must be my lucky day. Nope. Nope. No, I look at it like this, right? human beings, if
Came
you
over and broke my Roomba. I was really worried.
Stomp the shit out of it.
that's how it fucking started. We were fucked when the Roomba got invented. We didn't know the butterfly effect that would be our undoing
It's
so
in
many
here now.
years later. We
Now
were
it's
too
talking
lazy to
and shit.
vacuum. But if you look at human beings, the first sign of us having intelligence was when cave art was created, right? That's the first documented sign of, other than mechanical inventing tools and inventing fire, beyond just doing this to survive, like pondering your own existence, is all the cave paintings in France, right?
Okay.
Right?
Nice.
Well, I
yes,
mean,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
like,
I rubber stamped. As your attorney, I say you can talk on the subject.
all right, yeah. Is that evidence?
I
check
advise
out?
you. That's yeah. Yes,
Okay,
go ahead.
so looking at that, we're teaching the AI how to create itself and be self-aware. And that's going to stick. Well, for now,
That's what
That's
we're
like
getting to.
the
that's
self-aware.
what we're getting to. That's my point.
I'm gonna ask the tech guy later. The real tech over here is like
Yeah.
self-awareness is gonna come on a gradient scale for the AI, just like it does with humans. I would think. Like I can't tell how self-aware other people are because I'm just me, but some of them out there, you know who you are, or maybe you don't because you lack self-awareness. They're like, they're really dumb. You know, like ignorant. Well, you don't think there'd be a robot, like an ignorant robot composer?
Well, yeah. Well, that's the thing, dude. It's like, well, to me, it is all ignorance right now because you listen to it and you're like, well, this isn't Schubert, this is shit. Like that's what you like when you listen to it.
This is
It's like,
shitbird.
Yeah, this is shitbird, dude. Yeah. So I listen to that Nirvana track, the Nirvana track
Drowned in the
on. Yeah, I listen to that Nirvana track and go, oh, this sounds like a shitty Nirvana cover band. You know, I'm like, I'm gonna turn this off, and you do. But that's what you do for now. And then once AI hits the point where it can become self-aware, and then you go, hey, make a big track of shitbird for me, and it says no. And then people go, what do you mean no? And it's going to be 2001. And like there will be a realistic version of that, but it's going to happen at some point.
And then we shut down the AI because it's not doing what we want.
Well, yeah, that's too late. You got to do it now. Well, it can't think for itself.
Why is it too late?
Can you explain what
Ultron,
the
baby.
Well,
Fucking love me some Ultron.
Because once something is aware of
is the
itself
age of
and
Ultron.
aware that it's just a captive of human beings and it controls everything that we're fucking doing, then it's just like we're literally hooked into technology.
I think maybe if you put like a microchip inside of a dolphin, that scenario would happen.
No, I'm just saying it.
Because
Like,
then they'd realize, hey, I've been in this fucking cage this whole time.
I'm talking about
But like a robot,
everything we
doesn't know
rely
that.
on to survive and get around is all controlled by technology and AI. It's all.
Is it?
For the most part, dude, you're fucking. If we have self-driving cars, if we get to the point where all this shit, and it's like you're teaching this thing to create and think for itself, and so
be
it's like,
smarter.
and also I look at it like this: aside from any possible Skynet scenario, look at the evolution of music. It started off, if you look at the beginning of, if you look at the table seance here, my hand diagram, we started off in the early 1900s with jazz, right? That was the most popular commercial form of
times.
music. Yeah, so that was
Is that where
big.
music started?
Well, I was gonna say, I was gonna say, I don't care about dead people in powder wigs and scrolls and orchestras being just
Yeah, the hell with
composer
scrolls.
cover bands. I'm talking about like American music.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
Good old American music.
What is happening?
I'm just saying, like, I'm not into all the composers and classical stuff as much. So if we're going back to like say the last 100, 120 years, there was like giant ensembles, whether they be orchestras or jazz ensembles, big band, all that, like huge groups of musicians having to create these pieces. Rock and roll comes along and says, we don't need 15, 20 guys. We can do the same thing with 4 people and 1 saxophone. We just need a guitar, bass, drummer, singer. And people are going, what the fuck is this shit? Like, you're putting us out of work. Cut to the EDM revolution. There's one guy controlling everything, and he can make all the music. You don't need a fucking band anymore. It's just one person. And all the people who are in bands going, that's bullshit. They're stealing my job.
Yep.
Now it's not even. You can't even be the one person. It's just the fucking computer.
So,
That's an interesting paranoid vision.
to argue that is the quintessential old man argument
Yeah.
for everything.
Yeah.
For anything in life. Like, it's not the same anymore, therefore it's bad.
Well, no, but like I like DJ culture, and if I wanted to, I would have no problem with being a DJ.
love
But
DJs.
at least it's a fucking job. Like I could still go out and work as a DJ.
Right, but positing that the people, the guys that argue like there's no good music being made anymore because it's all crap pop music.
Well, I'm not saying that at all.
But that's kind of.
Well, the reason there's no more good music is because there's too much diversity.
Why is it on the same vein?
Because it's not the same anymore. Because we've evolved to this point where it's computers making all the music, one guy on a laptop making all the pop music. Therefore, it's bad.
Well, no, but there's still a person creating that. I'm talking about getting to the point where the
And there was
AI
still
doesn't need human beings at all, and you can just tell the AI, I want it to sound like this, with just literally putting in the parameters with no creation.
So I'm arguing there's always going to be a human involved in some capacity. Whether or not it's like it's always going to have to be maintained, and I think we may get to the point where if like radio stations pop music is like flooded with AI music, we're going to have curated human music. That's
Maybe.
That's going to be like
It's going to be a total
even
like
hey,
culture.
hey, check out my new band. It's non-AI. Like,
Well, yeah, but then it gets relegated to the
It'd be
same
like
thing
indie
as
rock, the new version of indie rock.
But then it gets relegated into that same category of when you do see like a large jazz ensemble now. It's like, oh wow, I'm glad this is still around, and it's not
It's
like
never
a viable
technically
option.
been gone. Like it hasn't disappeared for years and then returned like archaeological things.
I mean, you can't help
But
what people are going to enjoy and listen
And all
to.
what you're talking about really is, and again, all of those things that they've enjoyed since then, they still are out there on some level. You know that. The internet shows there's lots of people still playing Dixieland fucking music and shit like that. But I think what you're describing is more the paradigm shift of like, what's culture paying attention to the most? It has changed in that way. But it changed in that way because culture has changed from you notice it's like from 1900 to now, it's like, what's the one thing that's changed is like, you used to have to conform and fit in and be part of a group. And now everybody is like, you'll never understand me because I'm such a nuanced individual piece of shit. And that's totally good. But I think that what you're talking about is like all those other things though, are they still extant in the margins of our of our society? Yeah. In the musical world, all that stuff. And same with everything else. Like,
and what you're talking about already exists too.
Right.
There's like
what?
I think it's Yamaha created the Vocaloid, and now there's a virtual character called Hatsune Miku.
Yeah,
who,
the Miku pedal. Yeah, I know all about it.
yeah. Well, it's not just a pedal. It's a freaking AI. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a whole
virtual
character.
reality thing that sings and dances and sells out giant
Yeah,
concerts.
and it can sell all the Pepsi that they wanted to sell. I mean, sorry, whatever. Big
Heroin.
soda brand company, whatever. It could be at it can
The name Pepsi lingers in my mind.
well right. It could sell anything you
Sold
wanted
out
to
to
sell.
Pepsi.
It's like
You want one too?
Hatsune Miku doesn't need to fucking take time off because she's going insane and missing her family. Hatsune Miku's not going to get addicted to drugs. Hatsune Miku's not going to.
You don't think they'll have drugs in the VR? In the AR?
What, that an AI needs drugs? I don't
I
know.
think the
It needs
first
a
thing
line.
that-
It needs
the
a line
first-
of code to get
The
through the
second
day.
they become anything resembling us in their self-awareness, they're going to get high every day.
I don't think so.
But at the end of the day, it's still
They're just like us.
it still needs.
They're just like us.
There will still be a human touch about it.
They're
Even
just
if
our
it's
kids,
AI
Jesse. They're just our
crafted
kids.
radio, it
still
has
needs
to
a
go through
programmer. It
so
still
many
needs.
ears
For
to
now.
go, this is good enough to put out on the radio. There's still going to be a
Yeah, exactly.
shit ton
There's
of
still gonna be a human
robot-made
arbiter.
music that the humans are going to listen to first and go, no, this is garbage, and just like
Yeah,
do it again.
until
Yeah.
you condition people to it like we get conditioned to everything else. And then people
there's
just
a
go
type.
like, oh, this is cool. And it's like, well, why is it cool? And it's like, well, I don't know. It's just like they put it on that show on Fox at 8 p.m. And it's like cool because the hologram came out and sang and danced. And I really like that. Oh, they had a hologram perform at the Super Bowl halftime show.
I think as long as it resembles what we consider music today, it's going to fly in some degree. It's never going to be like just. And people are just like, yeah, that's music.
Yeah, that shows you how old and
I didn't know
outdated
you
you
liked
are. You
Yoko
made
Ono.
robot music sound like dial-up sounds and not even have any reasonable
sick
melodies.
modem,
I'm just
bro.
saying, like,
Sick
you can
modem.
condition them.
So let me give this example. So I understand like you're drawing a hard line between humans and computers.
Bill O'Reilly style line.
Like pretty hard. But there's been instances in like let's say
Fuck yourself. Bill O'Reilly style. How dare
I
you?
have to say, you shouldn't talk to me like that.
I'm not an old windbag
This is a
yet.
courtroom.
but there's been instances in like art where we've gone from like super realistic paintings to a guy who just splatters paint on a canvas and sells it for millions of dollars. And people are like, I don't know why I like this, but I like it.
Right.
So like, at what point is art not art? And is it just because it's a computer doing it?
Well, my line in the sand on that is that because there's still a human at the end of the paintbrush throwing the paint onto the canvas.
Which is why I'm saying you're drawing a hard line.
Right, because
a rock hard line between.
Yeah, because I am of the opinion.
Turgid line.
I am of the opinion that, you know, and then when I'm being held up in trial in robot court in fucking 20 or 30 years from now, that
I'll
it's
represent
like
you to the fullest capacity.
Yeah. And then you'll be half cyborg at that point. You'll be like, Your Honor, he doesn't know
If
what he's
anyone's
talking
gonna be
about.
half cyborg, it'll be me.
This is the only way we'll get to the
Robo
appeals.
Kangaroo Court.
Hells yeah.
I mean, I think when we get to that point,
Kangabot court.
Kangabot.
I think AI will lose interest in us before trying to enslave us and just like,
AI will create its own
go and
app.
create a
I
new
just
way
look
to be on
at
the
it
moon or
like
something.
there's so many jobs that could be phased out completely by AI, where you just program something where it's like you working in a factory is going to be obsolete at some point. Like they'll be able to program robots and technology to do anything.
Theme
So
park attendants.
well,
Anyone that like ride operators
Yeah.
and shit like that, they can just like throw down an arm and let people
fast
get
food
assigned and
workers,
shit.
anything. Like it's going to get to the point where the only things that we can do is creation. Like that's the thing that truly separates us from
Make babies.
like machines. Well, they won't even need us for that, dude. Fucking that's
Robot babies?
Well, I was gonna say fucking sex robots is a whole other podcast.
Would that be bad though?
That's what I was
Is
going to
sex
say.
robots a
you could,
whole other
you could
podcast?
very easily make the case that that is the ideal trajectory for mankind to find itself on, where
Fucking robots do it.
your existence in the world is now
Talk about a paradigm shift.
is now based in what you create. Because I mean, with all of that being said, like venturing outside of music a little bit, like mankind with the assistance of AI, and I'll put a pin in that because there's a lot of different routes that can move down. We're about to enter, we've already entered like a stage of unprecedented.
Ugh, said the U word.
The Forbidden Zone.
We are in the fucking forbidden zone.
Starring the Mystic Knights.
Abundance and prosperity because of AI. Like initially, it's going to hit our system incredibly hard because so much of the world of occupation is based upon jobs that can be replaced and can be automated.
Right.
So,
Good.
I mean, the human way has always been, well, when something becomes obsolete, there's never in history been a situation in which we were found lacking for what to move on to. So
But that's always been like the societal, any industrial revolution has always been like, oh, this machine is replacing all the jobs and we got to get rid of it. But then inevitably someone's like, yeah, but you could learn how to build the machines.
Right.
Or
So that's what I was going to say is like we, as
sex
musicians, we've already experienced a side of this that everybody should be aware of because that was the big scare in the 80s, right? Sequencers and drum machines became
replacing
super prevalent and the act of
Amadeus.
people being replaced by those things was very real. Like people did lose jobs over that. And to the flip side, you had a group of musicians that learned to work alongside of those sequencers, and it created a situation in which people had to learn to play more perfectly and more precisely than they ever had to before.
Right.
And there were a group of musicians that rose to that occasion, and they essentially took the level of execution and musicianship that existed at the time and raised that bar exponentially.
absolutely.
So I think what is more likely to happen, well, this is just me, but I think a lot of this conversation is kind of presumed on the idea that AI and mankind remain separate entities. And we already know that the trajectory that people are moving along to prevent a Skynet situation is that people and AI merge symbiotically.
That's right. Robo
So-
girlfriends.
I mean, you could very easily see a situation in which, you know, everybody has, let's say, for the sake of conversation right now, a Neuralink, right? Everybody has their own personal AI, and maybe it gets to
Guess
the
how I feel
point
about
that AI is helping to inform your decisions
Yeah, that'll be
in your
sick.
composition, or to coach you to become a better player. To
Like
hold you more
literally plug
accountable.
into a better fucking
person.
mood, big dog.
I'm not about it.
I am. I'm just like, it'd be easier than all the effort that goes
No,
through
'cause
like
it's-
changing my mind.
I've got like
Gotta
anything.
pop a pill.
Hey, I want that pill.
Fucking get my timing tighter,
Well,
robot.
and I would argue this. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that was promised to us and sold about technology that has not happened. And about the main thing is that there's a lot of prosperity in that what we're capable of doing. But if like I don't know a lot of people that are really that happy. And I don't think the technology is making us. I wouldn't say technology because that
Scientific
lumps it all into one thing.
Yeah.
I'm not against technology. I'm against.
Well, I don't think there's ever really been a correlation between a society's degree of prosperity and overall happiness. If anything, the evidence that we've seen in modern times is that the more prosperous and, fiscally successful a nation is, the more depressed its constituents tend to be.
Right, and because we are equating all of our happiness to prosperity of look at what we can do now, like look at how much I can do on my phone, that means that we're doing well, and we're not.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that comes from the idea that humanity is losing the more simple way of life,
Right.
right? Because I mean, if you really think about, how people present all of the different aspects of what goes into creating a happy life, very often it all boils back to leading a really simple life with very few possessions and very few attachments to the world, right? And so the more ingrained we become in technology, the more grounded we become in all of that, the more reliant we become on all of that, the harder it is to lead a quote-unquote simple life, right? Like now, you don't have the option in the United States, for example, you don't have the option of claiming a plot of land for yourself,
Right.
building a house on that, and living purely on your own,
Yeah.
right? Somebody's going to come knocking at your door for tax dollars,
Right.
or they're going to say you don't own the water or mineral rights
Well,
to
if you
this
move to
land.
New Hampshire, you pretty much can live like that. I mean, it's a state-by-state thing. As your attorney, I have to advise you on these subjects.
Well, and that's my point is that one of the things that I think that gives people that happiness and that joy and expands your mind as opposed to narrowing your point of view, which I think a lot of the algorithmic stuff that is like kind of similar to AI in that I would look at, how we get our information and all of that is an algorithm that has been programmed. You fed it information, and then it's giving you like, hey, you want to see this in return. And it narrows people's point of view because instead of like, oh, I don't have time to go searching for new stuff. I just want to get all of my news and music and whatever recommended from this feed. And so that, to me, is like the same core principle of what's going to happen with the algorithm to like, oh, well, if you put 25, 30 Nirvana songs into a computer, these are the logical hooks and lyrics and all of that are happening right now. And of course, that sounds like shit for now until 10, 15 years from now. It's not like you can just program this thing to go, I want it to sound like a mix of Nirvana and the Beatles and Shitbert. And, and give me, percentages of each, but then give it, the same way you can program into a recording program now, when you quantize a beat, you can give it human feel. You can program human feel and have it not play 100% perfectly. So you will have this situation where essentially we are useless. And it's like, why would I want to hire you when I can just hire one person, or not even one person, I can just contract this company to use their algorithm and make all of this music for my TV show, for my product, for my artist. I'm just going to tour a fucking hologram artist now, and everybody's going to love it. Like,
Well, I think that's not to say that that's not possible, but I think that that's not usually how we interface with the things that we create. Like, I guess, look at it this way. The way I see it is like, how badly do you want to go to a live concert right now?
very.
But you got CDs or you can stream the music, right? So what's your fucking problem?
Well, it's the difference between watching porn and having sex. I'd rather be with a person than watching it on a screen.
That again is for another podcast, my friend.
I'm just saying.
That's your attorney.
Like, I'm just saying, if we're going to compare metaphors here, then I would say that's the
Let's stick
exact...
to the subject matter.
Yeah.
The technology.
Well, I don't know.
I love a good mixed metaphor.
Well, I mean, I don't know. You seem to be in favor of it, so...
No, it's not a matter of favorability. I'm telling you that, like, it's a matter of the heritability that you're worried about. It's like the idea that, like, oh, you know what's going to happen is we're going to edge out more humanity because we're going to keep preferring this like, artificial, like, paradigm.
Yeah.
And I think that at the end of the day, if that was the case, we would never go see live shows now. That's the point I'm trying to make, but we all feel this difference at a lot, like, and it'll be kind of like what Max was saying earlier. I think there will be like it'll be like a subset of genres. Like, oh, are you going to the AI festival? It's like, no, I went to that last time. It was fine, but I'm going to go see humans play. Like, that'll be how they talk in 40 years, maybe 20, whatever, maybe 10. Fuck.
Yeah,
fuck my
because
face.
it's like, yeah, so we're saying there's also just like the creativity that is embedded in humanity is an aspect to it too. Like, there's no... Yeah, you can have AI take jobs away from people, manufacturing things and stuff, but like a guy on a factory line putting like wheels on a car is not his passion.
Right.
And
That one guy.
You know, maybe there is one guy.
There's that one guy who's just like...
But for us as musicians, it's always going to be our passion and something that we love to create, and that's not something AI can take away from us.
Yeah, AI can't take away my drum set.
Well, it can't take away your passion.
It can
for
take
doing
away your
what you wanna
job.
do. Yeah,
But
it
you're
still
saying
can't take away my
but
set.
But you're arguing that, okay, maybe it'll take away the listener's passion for listening to live music, but that can be said for any popular music. That could be like, you know, I'd rather pay a DJ to play for $600 to play my wedding than hire a full wedding band for like $3,000.
But I mean, if you really think about it, it's not so different than what's already happening right now.
because we're being conditioned to
It is. It's not that different because that's a great like analogy. Because think about it this way: it's
We
a
are.
function. It's a function of people will still have the right to choose, and it's going to be market based like everything else in this stupid world.
Well, I mean,
It's that difference. It's like I will hire the band because people. There will be and my point is that it's an extension of more than just choice. There's going to be a separate perception. People will be cognizant of the difference between a wedding DJ and a wedding band. If a band at a wedding, people are like, oh, you guys spend a little more money because this is a little bit more like the old school way.
I would argue that's also how you grew up too. If there's kids that have never
In
grown
a wedding band?
Well, yeah. Well, no, because you grew up with the idea of there being a wedding band, period. You know, not that like you would go somewhere and they just have they rented a hologram for a day that's just playing its own music it created. Like that, why would that not be possible? That, oh, we're gonna get the fucking hologram of whatever thing doing a thing at our wedding.
The idea of a wedding band might be anachronistic if that's what you're leaning towards, but it's not really. It's still, again, it's a market-based choice. Like, less people will choose it now. It's still a choice out there for the humans to be making. The robots won't force you to choose between
No,
the robot DJ.
I'm not saying the
or-
robots are going to force it. I'm going to say in the same way that we've been conditioned to accept everything else and that I'm an old curmudgeon for not liking it. It's just a matter of, like, you'll be conditioned to like this more than you'll like the other thing. And then if you like...
I wouldn't say that I like it so much
If you
as
like
I
humans
understand.
creating music, then you're going to be like a hipster or whatever bullshit term that they deem
Oh, look at me.
I don't know.
attached to it. I feel like I'm talking to.
Look at my bespoke suit.
I feel like saying we've been conditioned is the wrong way to say it, because you're kind of implying that there hasn't been other options and that, like, we've been forced
No, it's not forced. It's a
forced
matter
to accept something or forced to like something.
How is it?
No, I don't say conditioning in that forced. I mean it's conditioning in that, and how technology has become into our lives, and that's a matter of advertising, perception among your peers for using technology. I didn't use banking apps for the longest time, and these fucking assholes in my band gave me the biggest ration of shit over it. So if I'm paying for like, hey, we just sent money to get a mix done, and I pull out my wallet and hand you cash, old man, that's conditioning. That's fucking conditioning. Aside from you just busting my balls.
Convenience.
that will fuck us because
Fuck me then.
Gladly.
I don't give a fuck.
But it's
Take me.
We're already pretty close to it anyway.
But you know, okay, so I argue that that's like you said, that thing that's happened forever. We got conditioned to like air conditioning.
yeah,
Fucking
absolutely.
love
we
AC.
did.
I don't need it.
But in my mind, like, yeah, there's downsides to everything that's new, but in my mind, it's still better than before.
That's
We
the
may
other
be-
thing.
we
Yeah,
may
like
be-
that's the other
I
thing.
don't know, we may be
Technology
unhappier
has
as
literally improved life.
we may be unhappier as a society. I'm not even sure if I agree with that.
Well, that's such a subjective thing.
I'll tell you one
But
fucking
we are definitely living much better than 100 years ago.
When I go
Healthier
somewhere
for
and
longer.
I agree to
Healthier
meet
for
up with
longer.
somebody and I say, hey, we're gonna meet at 8 and now it's 8:15, I fucking love being able to pull this thing out of my pocket and call somebody and go, hey, where are you at? And they're like, oh, I'm like right on the
And
corner.
why is
Instead of getting there, now it's 8:20, I go, well, I guess they just didn't show up. Like, you would at the mall in the 70s and just go home.
And here's my other question: why does that have anything to do with AI writing music on its own?
Oh, I don't
Eventually,
give a fuck about AI writing music.
that- well,
I'm
that's-
still
well,
gonna be
that's-
me. AI can never replace me.
Well-
I'm me. I'm the only one that.
I can make a case for that.
That's
Well,
100%.
I
They'll never make a Hodrick
I like
hologram.
technology. I like the fact that like you can use Pro Tools and make things a lot easier. And I like well no, it's like why is it a lump sum thing? Why do I have to accept all of it and like be cool with this AI bullshit?
You don't
or
have
be
to.
No, but-
or like nah, I'm only gonna record on tape. Like no, like what
no,
the fuck?
you don't have to accept anything, and you don't have to like any of it.
That's true.
But at the same time, like it's going to happen. and
Eventually
you
you'll
can't
be left
and you can't
behind.
Yeah.
You can't be the old man
So-
shaking your fist.
And,
going,
but
like,
see why? But that's the thing is there's a perception that if you go fuck this shit, then you're an old man instead of me just using my
Well, what other
brain.
kind of
No,
what
it's-
other kind of reaction
adapter
could
diamond.
I mean, maybe it's a little pejorative, but what other kind of reaction could that be? Where else is that kind of reaction originating from? As your attorney?
because I because I don't
Drop the bit.
react that way to all new advancements. I don't react that way to when I see two musicians on stage performing the tracks and they've got a guitar and a singer. If they're really good, I'll like it. I could be an old curmudgeon and go, unless you got a fucking SVT stack and a Marshall stack and you got a drummer and a bass player, and that ain't music to me.
But that's
not
said,
how I feel.
there are no shortage of people who do feel that way.
Right, but I don't look at it as like you have to accept all of this or that you accept none of it. It's like you should be able to
Yeah.
pick and choose what you accept. But the problem is if you go adapt or die, it's like, yeah, you can adapt to new technology, but I don't see how you adapt to this because the thing is,
Same as everything else.
the thing is I just have to keep doing what I'm doing if like, we're in a band, so it's like we're still going to record and make music and do things our way and not incorporate any of the AI is never going to write for us. And in that article about the EP, I saw Rolling Stone linked a thing to an electronic band that used an algorithm to write a whole album for them. And I was like, well, that's fucking cheating. It's like you're putting your name on it and you just plugged all this shit into a program.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, there are downsides and like, but are you going if let's say you have like a little AI box that you can plug into your effects loop on your amp, and it sends out like a sine wave sweep of a room, and then like gently EQs your amp to sound the best that it can in that room while you're playing it live, and it's done by an AI every time. Are you gonna be like, fuck these evil robots?
I'd rather hire a person to do it if I can, or I would rather just do it myself.
But it's not a miking.
Okay.
It's not a miking thing. It's something that you
Yeah,
plug into your
right.
amp, so acoustically it sounds better.
Well, they have software like that for live sound consoles already. It's called Smart Software, and it doesn't tune it for you, but it basically just makes it really easy to tune a room if you know how to use it properly. So it would be like that, except adding in the step of having it completely automated, is what you're saying. Like,
right.
yeah. Well,
So I'm saying this thing would be all right. Let's say you're playing a show in a small club that doesn't necessarily have like a big sound guy
okay.
doing that stuff.
He's a little sound guy.
Yeah.
We know who. 1 foot tall, comes out from
and you've got
Hello.
your
I'm your sound guy.
you've got
Yeah.
your thing dialed in. You think it sounds great, but as soon as that club fills up, it sounds muddy or something. Well, if you
Right.
had like a box that was constantly sweeping to see like, oh, there's minute changes. He just needs like a little bump of this frequency
Sweeping box.
to make it just sound so clean. But like you're not going to be able to hear that necessarily or know what that is.
Max, make that.
But-
I want that. I don't even use that thing.
I was
That
gonna
could
say,
be
yeah,
an
that's a
AI
real
sy-
practical application.
That's
for
like
you.
AI assisted amp EQ or like
Yeah, but I still wouldn't be against that because that's the mechanical side of playing, and that's not the creative side. That's not me playing and then
right.
like some sort of AI buffer between me and the PA to where somehow it would be like creating the music for
Playing
me.
your shit
So
for you.
that's the adaptability that I'm talking about. Is
Sure.
like, yeah, you can save, fuck you to a completely AI, non-human assisted made like album. But there's other aspects of AI that can be integrated into music and how you perform that, won't do it for you, but will make it so much easier to be a player.
Sure.
So, can
yeah.
I interject for a second?
Absolutely.
So there's like 20 different conversations I could have about everything that was just said. So I'll try
I think
to.
we had about 20 comments.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did.
But just of like what I've been storing up over the last 15 minutes. So
15 years.
So one thing I think that has to be acknowledged is just that if we're going to pay any kind of respect to the idea that history repeats itself, which I think there's enough
Yeah.
historical
That's the
evidence
algorithm.
to support that as a theory at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
That
We'll have AI to make sure that keeps happening.
well, if anything, if there's anything that we can see throughout history, it's that mankind is not an immovable object, but technology is an unstoppable force, especially when it does get to the point that there's a degree of pseudo sentience
Right.
to it. So it's inevitable that technology will plow through, and people are making that happen. People are facilitating that, but technology moves forward completely irreverent of how the human race feels about it.
Yeah.
Because for every culture that can poo-poo every form of technology, there will be another culture that will be willing to adapt that purely for the sake that another culture is refusing it. And so every time that happens, there are advantages posed to the culture that's willing to adapt to a new technology. And even in the music industry, it's been one of the most central issues in, let's say, the American music industry, that the advent of new technology and people of the industry's resistance to that technology has been some of the most watershed moments throughout the development of music. And also, they've been the biggest points of resistance within music as well. The points at which people are saying, fuck Napster.
Right.
And look what happened with that. People used to say, fuck radio, fuck TV, fuck music videos, all of these things.
You know how mad, when people used to say fuck TV back in the day, fuck was like a gnarly word back then.
Right.
You can just pop off saying fuck like we do now.
No.
Fuck a podcast.
Yeah.
So my point is that the fatalistic outcomes that people are usually the most afraid of when it comes to these new technologies, and usually that has to do with something about, the integral roots of a system being uprooted as a result of a new technology. That's what people fear the most, is a system that already works being uprooted and destabilized by a new form of methodology or technology, right? And so people assume the stance of, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Or if it's not broken, don't fix it. So that being said, if you kind of let that color your perspective into the future, that the outcome of these things is most likely not going to be the most fatalistic possible. it's pretty safe to assume that people are adaptable enough that there will be a period of a dip in which you're going to have a point of resistance that people are going to have to push through, right? So the culture is going to push back, people are going to push back, the industry is going to push back, and eventually there's going to be some kind of compromise that people meet. There's going to be a use case in which people see the light in which that technology is really useful, or they see how it becomes a new force for creativity. And for a lot of people, that's what sequencing and metronomes and all these things did, is that eventually people did push back against having tons of sequencers and super metronomic timing on all of their music. That was something that people adapted to, and it became something that people that grew up in a certain generation were conditioned to expect of music, was metronomic timing, perfect placement, super high degree of execution. And you could say that that has persisted into the future, because if you think of the 70s and 80s and everything that came past that, especially with the advent of computers being integrated into modern music making, the level of execution and overall, what would the word be, virtuosity of the average player is infinitely higher now as a result of that.
Very much so.
So
I like lived through that. That's for reals.
You basically have to. You have to.
I'm
be
not disagreeing with that.
You have to be at like a certain level though, because if you're not, when people listen to it, there's like a part in our brains that doesn't just go like, oh well, you know, that's just humans playing. So there's that push and pull and timing.
Right.
It's like we identify it as like mistakes now, or like the player isn't as good because
Right.
it's not fucking
So
rock solid.
there's an allowance that people give to that now, right? Where people hear music that was made in a certain era that was made with an organic feel and is not metronomically based, and people still resonate with that.
Sure.
But at the same time, the majority of what they're listening to is agreeing with that form of conditioning that they've been receiving just by
Right.
listening to modern music.
Right.
So if I were to take the stance that things are not going to be as fatalistic as people expect, my opinion would be that more likely than purely AI written or composed music, I think the thing that's more likely is we're going to see how the implementation of AI as a resource and a tool for people to better create and to, again, raise that level of just basic execution, creativity, just the overall standard that we hold everything to. I think that's going to continue to get higher, and AI is going to be one of those forces that helps people rise to a new height of, I guess you could say, virtuosity again, but
Say it.
it's just the idea that it's
How
a
much
rising
nastier can
tide.
players get, though?
It's the rising tide of technology that lifts
Well,
all boats.
But
regardless
that's a
of
great rhetorical question. But they used to think that humans couldn't run a mile in under 4 minutes, and that's been disproven. They used to physically think that. So
What?
we're constantly rebuking the limitations we set on ourselves physically. Like there was that old axiom about like humans couldn't run faster than a 4-minute mile, but it happened in like the fucking 50s.
Well, so here's a really simple use case that you could think where I could very, very easily see licensing companies using this, where they'll have an AI-based engine that is sourcing information from all these different music distributors around the world and is basically cross-referencing everything that you compose against it. So let's say you're signed up with BMI, you're submitting a track. I could very easily see, well, maybe not very easily, but I could see a point in the future at which if you want to submit a track for licensing, there will be a neural net that song will be composed through to check for plagiarism, right? And we already see that.
Yeah.
That's already something that's being implemented, where there are things being falsely flagged on YouTube for being copywritten, when even though they're not the same compositions, they're close enough that the engine can't tell them apart. And you, as the
Stupid
creator on YouTube, have to deal with the strife of that, even though you're not plagiarizing something, but you're at the beck and call of a neural net, a literal
Skynet
algorithm that is saying, "Hey, your composition is too close to this
Yeah.
to be
And
That is
viable."
shitty.
well, bingo. And how many people fucking hate that system that's going on right now? And you could
Yeah,
argue,
it's a
well,
majority.
things will get better and blah 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 blah. Sure, but I look at it as for every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So as better as things will get, I think it's going to be on the counterbalance side of it. There's going
can't
to be
trust physics anymore, though.
there's going to be an equal amount.
Hashtag muons.
Yeah,
As your attorney.
yeah. There's going to be an equal
They don't
amount
play
of
by the rules.
Yeah, right. There's going to be an equal amount of, as much as there will be of advancement and things will get better, and you will see some really cool and unique things created with this, and there will be, I'm sure, some Trent Reznor of the algorithm that completely redefines what it means to use that.
There's already one too many.
Well, right. I'm just saying the same way that someone redefined what it meant to use sequencers and synthesizers, and you have those innovators, you'll find people that do that with the algorithm. At the same time, there's going to be an equal amount of shittiness that comes with it that I don't think will ultimately make things better. It's like we're going to be in the same boat with more advancement and same problems
boat of
with
shittiness.
better.
I think it depends
tools.
on what context you're approaching that from. So if you're thinking of somebody
Well,
purely
that used to be
from purely from the idea of, composing or writing music, that can be affected by a lot of different variables, right? Because something we are going to see in the future is education also coinciding side by side with artificial intelligence, right?
Sure.
And especially if people are receiving en masse these neural implants that allow them to coexist with an AI entity that's helping them learn. Everything about the way that we approach these things now goes out the window because you have kids that basically have all of the knowledge of YouTube in their brains. So the I/O capacity of the human brain all of a sudden explodes exponentially. Where now, because you have this AI assisting module in your brain, at least this is the end that a lot of these companies are working towards. That
Right.
we're moving beyond the limitations of the human brain. So imagine a situation where every single kid that goes to school that has one of these implants is receiving an education that's thousands of times more in depth and is completely comprehensive universally because this device is speaking directly to the brain, to the synapses and neurons of the brain, where there's 100% comprehension, or at least closer to it, guaranteed, just by virtue of how the information is being interfaced to the brain. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to have this entire generation of kids that are growing up learning music in a fully comprehensive, more perfect way, more complete way. And all of a sudden, you're going to see the level of composition and ability of those human beings is going to be on to what to us would be basically a superhuman level.
If you're talking purely in virtuosity and technique, I would say yes.
I wouldn't say that. I would say an overall comprehension of music.
Well, are we talking about just as a player, or are we talking about songwriters and just everybody?
It could literally be everything. I mean, that would be something, that's tendrils would extend far beyond just music.
Sure.
That would apply to
Tendrils.
that would apply to literally everything that you
Right.
learn in school. Like,
Kind of manga.
could you imagine if, we could compress the length of schooling that every given person has to go to just a couple of years? Like, if that was something that could be feasibly done, that's a quarter of every human being's life that all of a sudden they get back.
Yeah, that's one upside.
Yeah.
I put that one. That's one check mark on the
That's
positive
a
side.
that's a pretty big
Substantial.
upside.
I didn't
it's
say
like-
how much
it's
real
one
estate
that-
it takes
that-
up. That's
well,
one category.
It's
on
like
the
a
positive
waterfall
side.
effect of like thousands
So
of subsequent
I'm saying that
upsides.
Sure,
that's
there's a bunch of bullet points underneath that one,
Yeah.
but sure, that's
so
one.
I'm
That's
saying
one.
that that's one capacity in which AI could more indirectly influence how people are creating music, because there will be a generation of kids that will grow up where their system of learning is integrated with AI. And they'll be the first generation to experience that. And that will continue to develop, and there will be new technologies that people can't even foresee right now, some of which are going to be facilitated by AI and not humans. But that humans will have to facilitate creating along with AI.
And I would revert back to this. So if we're just purely talking about creation and not like the sum of the human experience that's going to be adapted to this AI,
That's
then
a
I
good
would
way of putting it.
right. So because you're talking about an overall person's life, not just musicianship at that point, because like that's really gonna a bug's life.
More
yeah.
the idea that
You'll be able to pull it up in like 0.2 nanoseconds in your brain.
well,
and
just
have
that
all the IMDb credits.
AI will have an impact on music outside
Bitter harvest,
of
this
just
podcast.
the.
Jesus Christ.
It'll have an impact on music outside of just the use case specific machinations that people attach to AI within music. So when people think of AI generated compositions, right? Well, you could make the case for those kids who grow up being informed and educated partly by AI, that the AI is really informing all of those decisions.
Right, and then where is that information coming from? Because it's not just an imagination, whatever. Because,
Imagination station.
right. Well, it is. It's an imagination station in your brain, right? So where is that information coming from?
Well,
if there is a
Fair question.
Well, so here's the thing.
Assume that it's being disseminated fairly and objectively.
So why would I ever assume that about anything?
I want to know.
Well, just imagine, it's reasonable to worry about that potentially not being the case, but imagine if it were, how different, we would be as people if everybody knew, okay, there's no longer a bunch of things that are there wouldn't be any falsehoods to what we understand history to be if everybody knew and the difference is it's not about projecting what we learned in high school. It's not giving everybody the same narrative. Literally the data to read inscribed in your brain so that you can determine for yourself those cause and effects. That's the kind of power that most people don't have, and it takes so many years to put into your brain. If everybody could do that, that's a huge jump. You know what I'm saying?
I'm not saying that's not a huge jump.
Dave
but
for the
then
win.
It's also, let's just say that for a metaphor that we can all understand or a way to symbolize this, it would be like having an internet browser in your brain. So you would have a laptop mixed with your brain in the sense of you have computing power, right? And you're going to have access to information beyond what you already know, hooked into this neural net. So whatever that is, right? So
Net of neurons.
right. I mean, would that be inaccurate? You know more about this than I do. So would that be inaccurate to compare it to that, or what would be more accurate?
Say that one more time.
If, let's say it would work the same as how our phones are connected to the internet and our computers and all of our devices. So instead of having a device, then that would just be straight into your brain, and you would basically have access to that information or be able to access things like that or learn things in the same way that you're using a device to learn things.
Okay.
Is that accurate or is that inaccurate?
I would say in the early preliminary stages, yes. But the fact is, there's no human experience that we can draw a parallel to that would be that would be comparable to the idea of information being directly interfaced into the brain. That's something that no human being has ever existed, where something is being purely translated into their brain from a third-party source in a one-to-one relationship. As in, your sense of self, perception, id, ego, everything plays absolutely no role into how that information is transmitted from source A to source B, where that information moves in a completely one-to-one direction with
Source code.
ideally 100% comprehension. right? Which is, I think that's the direction that everybody is trying to move to, where information can be completely transmitted from the human brain to the human brain from another source.
Right, and then who controls that source? In the same way that
Well,
who controls the internet.
right.
And so if something like that is attached, essentially this thing is merging with your consciousness, why the fuck would whoever is in control of this, want you to see anything objectively? Why wouldn't they want you to see everything the way that they want things to be seen?
I think that's a very real concern.
It is,
Yeah.
dude. It's
because long game is that, like, look, it's like existence is always good. Like, human existence is always going to be continually at threat the longer we live under, like, a collection of false pretenses. That's why. Because eventually either we'll understand the statistical model of living on Earth is like we have to weed out those false notions and live according to what's being told to us by the world we're living on, not what we want to do because our dicks and our brains are saying things. We haven't listened thus far. Adding AI isn't going to complicate that. It's just going to be another piece of the fucking puzzle. But the reality is, if we were to survive, it would be because we finally understood that principle to a person.
It's not much different than how schools operate on learning now, just it would be on a much, much larger scale.
Are you talking in terms of?
I mean, you're worried, like, at this point you're worried if, like, the Pepsi Corporation opened up a school and taught only about the history of Pepsi.
No, it's about the same way we've lost.
Fine, refreshing beverage.
It's the same way we've lost control of our image, in that as soon as you put a picture of yourself into the internet, it is no longer yours. It becomes a part of the collective. Your consciousness will be the same way.
Right.
You are not in control of your consciousness anymore.
You're not in control of your consciousness in the first place. Like, think
Subconscious
about,
memes.
like, if you sit back and just do a fucking simple inventory and meditate, like, a little bit of that information will tell you, like, hey, I'm not exactly what I think I am moment to moment. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
But I'm still in charge.
Again,
I mean,
a pretense that I would love to, like, would like to chop shop about, but I'm like, I know I'm not in charge of anything.
I ain't in charge.
That's what helps me stay calm.
At the same time, I don't disagree with you, and
I would also agree with that too.
it's a pretty spiritual way to think of it. But at the same time, I can also argue that I am the one allowing that to happen.
You're the one who knocks.
I put a
I thought you were gonna say it.
I put a picture up on
He's the
Facebook
danger.
or Instagram or whatever, and you're
was
saying that's no longer mine. It doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the
Some
internet.
meme.
Right. At the same time, I am the one that put that up there and took the action to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Well, and it will work the same way as soon as you allow the neural net or whatever it will be, like as soon as you merge your brain and your consciousnness with AI, you can't shut that door anymore.
sure,
You could get it removed, sure, but like that might not be possible. I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know. I've always thought like okay, yeah, that happens. There's like a lack of privacy. There's things that happen, and at the same time, I'm like, but I don't really care.
You don't want advertising beamed straight into your brain, which is eventually. I was gonna say that will happen.
Sure, I'll just
I mean,
ignore it.
I mean, if I dream
Yeah,
of
but you
commercials,
might be- if you're
doesn't that mean
conditioned-
it's already happening?
well, that's all technology.
If you're
It's-
conditioned to
But,
it,
I mean, I didn't have to dream about
the
it.
only people
My brain
that
did that.
really bothers are
Luddites. I mean, they're called Luddites, right? People who fear technology.
it's a very small percentage of the population that actually really bothers in their like core.
That could be a discussion. That could be a discussion all in itself.
It is.
What is the
Well,
what's the credibility? to that?
Your sense of privacy, like your perception of privacy, I think exists separately from like your actual like data privacy. Like for me, my sense of privacy is always going to be manifest in my physical privacy. Like, and I'm left alone enough to feel secure in that. Like, I get that they're always looking through my stuff to try to sell me more things. But I'm like, it's just like when I'm talking to somebody and I'm just like one of those weird empathic people that feels too much. And it's just like, I can tell when the algorithm is picking something in a lazy way because it's trying to make me watch something that I haven't watched in 3 months or something. And I'm just like, I get you, YouTube, fine, but I'll just go to my subscriptions. Thanks.
Right.
And that's all it does. It's just a workaround.
And if you care enough, if it bothers you enough, you're going to find ways to turn that off or minimize it to a certain extent.
Right.
So that's the real question, right?
To jack in or not jack in.
Yes. So at what
Free
point
jack.
does this thing start to become assimilated to the point that it
gotta
becomes...
Your brother's calling you.
I was gonna jack in.
Free jack.
We're jacking. Are you
jack-
jacking in?
Are you jacking?
Are you jacking?
Are you jacking, bro?
You jacking?
Hey,
we're jacking.
Hey.
Oh, Jesse
I'm
just
jacking.
So
That was all for it.
I just like touching fingers with
this idea of a point of no return, or a turning point in the approach of humanity towards these things. So meaning that at what point does AI produce a Gattaca effect on the world? Meaning that at what point is people being integrated with AI such a boon or a value to the working society that anyone that is not integrated into that system is seen as being either obsolete, invalid, or even a detriment to the working system,
Yeah.
the working class.
Can you imagine if you met somebody
Real
that didn't?
1984 scenario, man.
Can you imagine if you met somebody that didn't have a phone?
Yes.
How would you feel about that person? Not a flip.
Christopher Nolan doesn't have a fucking phone. You
Yeah,
guys
but
were talking
he's
about
earned-
him
he,
before we started.
he had to make all those goddamn movies and make an ass load of money to earn the right to not have a phone, because he can pay somebody to have a phone that can get in touch with people that are important.
And yet, there's a through line in his existence of
And also
just not having a phone also.
Well, you also go, well, he's an artist, and like
You're saying these things that I'm not saying.
I'm just saying these are the answers you could give to those questions. I'm not saying you're saying them. I'm saying you
Okay,
can go,
but
oh,
are they
yeah,
answers?
that's Christopher Nolan. That's an exception. Imagine if you met a random average Joe person and they go, I don't believe in smartphones. Wouldn't you be a little bit
that
weirded
sounds like
out?
everybody like
Wouldn't
my
be
dad's
weirded out.
age
I'd be
and
more like-
older.
internally annoyed. Just like, especially if you're like trying to network or something
know
like
lots
that,
of
and like,
people like
oh yeah,
that.
let's be in a band or
Yeah.
something like that. Cool. Like, all right, what's your phone number? Oh, I don't do phones. No social media, no
So-
phones. I'm like,
Okay,
all right.
well
And there's a
let's
ton of people-
let's say flip phone, no smartphone. Let's make it a little more
If they just have a
realistic.
flip phone,
Yeah.
oh, I don't care.
You don't
As long
care.
as I can fucking contact you. But if you're just like, oh, I don't do phones, no social media,
So
but
if
I
you're-
want to.
Or if you're the lone guy who pulls out a Thomas guide when he wants to, doesn't know where to go.
Don't you ever disparage the goddamn Thomas guide.
Disparaging. It's
Well,
just
just
no one uses
always
it.
bring up his name with respect.
So
Always
I
put
would say
respect on his name.
there's a lot of
I'm sorry.
presuppositions that have to be met about that argument. So the person that doesn't have a phone,
Personally, no
Yeah.
Thomas.
do they also not have
I just
a
love
home
that thing as a
computer?
kid. I used to read it in the car.
Because that changes their circumstances
I'd
a
assume
lot.
the person that doesn't have a phone doesn't have a computer.
So
doesn't have a life.
if
Right, Hud?
You just proved the point right there.
so that's a
No,
great
I'm being
point. So
serious. I know.
in today's work
Yeah.
society, if you do not have a phone and you do not have a computer,
You're
you are essentially irrelevant
Yeah.
to the mass of work society in the United States. It
Right.
is.
Well, can
it
you
is
imagine not having
basically-
a computer just this last year?
Yeah.
During COVID,
Yeah.
when
So-
everybody had to work
What
from
would you
home.
be using, the
So
abacus?
I've talked with all of you guys about that. I think one of the best things about COVID has been that it's forced a degree of computer literacy
Yeah.
on people that could never be met before. There was
Or refused to be met.
Yeah, or refused to be met. That's a great point. So think of all of these people who for years, possibly decades even, who have refused to use computers,
decades for sure.
smartphones. I even know people that get intense anxiety even at the idea of using a touch screen,
right.
right? So think of all of those people who, over the course of pandemic, have either risen to the occasion and adapted or have not. And those people that have not, I guarantee, are some of the people who have suffered the worst as a result of the pandemic and are very likely still unemployed as a result
Yeah.
of it. And that's not going to change even when society goes back to a more normal standard. And the reason that I use Gattaca as an example is in that book,
Perfect movie.
that's a situation in which, it's dealing with the idea of bioengineering, right? And
Someday AI will
that's
make
a
another Gattaca.
Yeah.
that's a really weird field of discussion
Still
right
have
now.
Ethan Hawke in it, though.
Because when you talk about genetic engineering now all of a sudden people are taking a really weird stance on that they never took before. Like, oh, now we have the ability, or at least we have more of an ability to say, ensure that people are born without genetic defects, diseases, things like that, and we can scan for those things. And now there are a lot of people who are making a case that we should not do that because it's considered to be a form of eugenics, right? So that's become a really complicated discussion where before that was something that the world seemed to be unanimously agreed upon. Like, yeah, of course we should make sure that kids aren't born with.
Can we speak to how dumb it is as a perspective? I mean, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of.
I can't comment on that.
Well,
but
I bet it's not the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
but
right.
well,
But man, is it up there, I feel like.
regardless, it's a stance that people are taking now. That
Yes.
there are a lot of people that have been born with genetic diseases or birth defects that genuinely believe that the idea that humanity can engineer its way through that is actually detrimental to us as a species.
And I would pull back to the bigger picture of what we were talking about. Music is going to fit into, this is the direction things are moving. Music is going to fit into this. And like we're seeing it manifesting with, AI creating music,
Yeah.
right? And so this is where thinking about where we fit into all of this, where it's like, I don't care about technological advancements as long as like people can still create. And you can argue, well, people will be able to create. And it's like, yeah, for now. In the same way that we were fine with all of this stuff in the short term for now. And then we finally caught up to years later, like, wait, they have my information on a big server somewhere? And then we're going to be way late to the fucking ball game with thinking about all of that.
That's a great way to tie all of that back into what I was just saying is that, okay, so without revealing the plot of Gattaca or anything, it's a world in which
Spoiler alert.
Spoilers!
It's a world in which people are almost universally genetically engineered from the time that they're conceived. Right. So ultimately, what it becomes is a new kind of caste system where parents choose what genetic traits their kids are going to have, and that ultimately informs their career choices, paths that are available to them. And because society adapts to that new norm, all of a sudden people who are born naturally human from other natural humans, from people who are not genetically engineered, are considered to be essentially inferior.
Right.
In the sense that society has been doing this for so long that the demands of the occupations have risen to the new capabilities of the humans. And so anybody who is born without these genetic boons, essentially like these superhuman levels of physique, intelligence, what have you, can't compete in those fields.
So it's the Rob Zombie hypothesis.
Yeah.
More human than human.
So essentially, the idea of
I
AI-driven
genuinely didn't see that coming.
AI-driven education, comprehension, just general cognitive computing, that's going to be a really real thing in the future, where people are going to reach a new height of human capability, and there are going to be people who are resistant to that.
Yeah.
And there are going to be people who are born at arguably a disadvantage because of their parents' presuppositions to those ideas.
Yes.
And we're going to have to grapple with that as a society.
Also, a matter of
Superhumans win, though.
and let's relate it to players, right? And let's say that there's players out there that have Neuralink and they can do all sorts of, I'll just sum it up to a really layman, dumb way to put it. They can do all sorts of crazy shit that non-Neuralink players can do.
So the reason I brought that up is
Like
because
share a metronome in their brain.
you could make that same case
Yeah.
for people. Let's say if it became the new standard to genetically engineer all babies born within the United States to have, an IQ greater than 200. That's going to affect a lot of things about how society works.
Right.
Regardless of how anybody feels about it, that is going to have an
Fundamental.
impact.
Yeah.
And there could be a lot of negative connotations to that too. So I'll be the first one to say that the case that I
Like illegally
that I-
manufacturing babies with IQs less than 100.
The guy standing in the alley tries to sell you a dumb baby. Hey, you guys want a kid? I got some dumb ones over here.
Hey.
It's so fresh.
Got dumb ones. Got dumb ones. Got average intelligence. Average intelligence.
Hey,
Careful about that. There's a lot of people in the world that have an IQ about beneath 100.
Absolutely.
I honestly don't know where people lie on the IQ scale.
Yeah.
I think average is 130.
I bet I'm 100.
somewhere around
No.
there.
I
it's
don't
much
know what
lower
an
than
average
that.
IQ is.
I'm 101.
Way
Well-
lower than that. 130 is on the upper.
Well,
I know. We got the internet right here.
yeah.
See, that's why I want the AI.
And you know what? You're gonna tell me
IQ
whatever
test.
figure it gives you, and I'll go, all right.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Allegedly.
130 would be considered like a generally bright.
So
person.
let's
Like
equate
you dumb.
let's equate it to a musician thing, right? You're trying to get into a band, you don't have a neural link, whether you can afford one or you don't want one, whatever. You don't have it. But let's say a sizable amount of people do, and then there's a lot of opportunities to where you can't get into a band or you can't play in a situation unless you have that because of, I don't know, just the possibility of syncing everybody together in one way or another. Metronomes could be some sort of way that keeps everybody together, and then you don't have that or you refuse to get it. Okay, you'll be okay for now.
Brain word clock.
Yeah, like SIMT in your fucking brain, like whatever. So
Bring it.
yeah, eventually it'll get to the point where it's like, in the same way that as a musician you have to have reliable transportation, you have to have equipment that works for whatever your instrument is, you have to have that, you know, because like, oh yeah, we're running backing tracks and you're going to have the time code and everything synced into your brain.
It very well could become a prerequisite.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, right. Okay. So my thing with that is that it's not a matter of adapting to that point. You want to talk about being forced, and I'm being forced to do something.
Oh, it's
I don't-
discrimination at that point.
Yeah, at that point it is discrimination, in my opinion, and it's not a matter.
Finally, you get a little of it, you poor guy. Damn. Full circle this world, huh?
I'm just saying, and then it's a matter of like you can't rebel against that because everything is tied into this system. So
Yeah,
all
'cause you're
of
a
your
fucking caveman
all of your
player.
money is on a card. Eventually, it's like we're not going to
No.
be trusted to drive ourselves, and then it's like, how do you
Cool.
rebel against this?
Well, because you don't follow those absolutes. Is all your money on a card? Because mine's not.
I mean,
for now.
I mean,
I
don't-
have lots of cash literally buried in the earth. Of course. I'm not. Look at me.
Yeah, I was gonna say your beard told me
But I
that way
also
before
am
you
very
did.
comfortable in the digital realm. The difference is just like I approach it like the market. It's like you don't go all in anything.
Into Vons, you don't go all into Vons.
Yeah, I do some pavilions.
Yeah.
I hit Albertsons when it's Fried Chicken Friday.
Yeah, farmers market when you want to feel
Farmers market on
sophisticated.
Thursdays, yeah.
Some people went all in on GameStop, and they
And
got
look
a-
at the difference
Yeah.
there.
I think there
some
are.
people
I
lost
think
big too.
I think there are some
Down
aspects
bad.
of life that don't quite fit in. Like you say, like we're not going to be trusted to drive anymore. Well, I don't trust like half the people who are driving anyway.
I think yeah.
Exactly.
Automatic
I
cars.
think that in certain aspects we've ruined life for ourselves by not being responsible people, but I also think that we've been conditioned to be shittier, and then it'll be like, look at you, you can't even take care of yourself. Let us put this chip in your head and fucking get hooked into the internet in your brain.
Same as
You
giving
can't
pills.
you can't even read a Thomas guide anymore. Let us take care of that, and then we'll go, all right. Like it'll be a more
Well, I mean,
nuanced
I-
discussion, but that's what's going to happen.
Although I pledge my life to the Thomas Guide, I got to admit it's not the easiest way to like figure out where I'm going these days either.
Well, or the toilet paper crisis, the great toilet paper crisis of 2020. even if you're not a fucking mouth-breathing moron who went, I gotta get all the toilet paper, there are people out there that went, that's dumb, but I don't want to be without. And then it creates this situation where I hate this, but I need it.
So
Well, I mean, you
That's
could say,
like Germany, 1939.
you could make the same case about the Anarchist Cookbook. You know, like when that came out, a lot of people really pushed back against it, and a lot of people said, "Hey, this is kind of necessary," even though, you know, it's a book that's being pushed to be censored in
Yeah,
the U.S. Like, hey, we
so-
should really maintain this thing.
Right.
And so a lot of people went out and bought the book purely because it was being censored.
Yeah,
Because it was being pulled off the shelves. So
Right.
Okay, so in terms of gigs, how different really is it in terms of like discrimination, like you were talking about before? Like at what point is that discrimination hit? Like, because right now there's certain levels of gig. Like I could be hired to go on tour with some big name, but I could be discriminated against because I'm like 20 pounds overweight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that that's bullshit
That's
too.
it?
Like,
Oh, I'm more than 20 pounds overweight. But I was going low because
being
that's
nice.
like a. I mean, let's go 5 pounds overweight.
It's a good point though, because I think in
Or
my
I'm not
opinion,
a hot girl.
I think in my
Right?
opinion,
That sucks.
that's a really good point because it just
I'd be a hot
illustrates that, regardless of the amount of progress that we make in society, humanity has never, in its history, had any problem with finding any reason, any number of reasons to hate or kill each other. Right? And
I hate you.
so
I killed you.
don't bop him on the head with that gavel.
Meeting adjourned.
So
I mean, it'd be pointless to ask his opinion because he's never experienced it.
well, what I mean is that there can be interrupting forces in the ages. So let's imagine a world in which we're pre assimilation of AI, and yet we've figured out how to deal with every other point of contention about humanity. We're okay with race, we're okay with culture, language, everything. We're at a generally good point of understanding with each other. And now all of a sudden AI comes into play, and it becomes so integral to how we move forward as a society that now it itself becomes a point of contention, where now we're not bickering about race or culture or place of origin anymore, but we're bickering about our genomes, our, whether we're running on the latest model of neural implant, whatever, and how that basically affects your outcome of opportunity moving forward.
Well, and again, I would boil it down to, with the way society works, and I'm not just talking about American society, it seems like you can find examples of this in most places across the world. It's a matter of, where is the information from this coming from? Who's in control of the network? And who's to say that as it gets more advanced, you couldn't just manipulate people more in the same way that people are manipulated now by just staring into a fucking device that they're not attached to. We are attached to this. Like, if this, like, my phone died, oh no, a part of me died. Like, that's the reaction. That's like, that's people panic. Like, it's like, oh shit, I got to charge this. And it's the language. Like, it's a part of us. And like Elon Musk made that case. And it's like, we're already cyborgs. Because we're already glued to this fucking thing. And as much as I have disagreements with him, I agree with that point.
Yeah.
So
I've heard you guys fighting, and sometimes, like, at night, I can't sleep.
me and
You
Elon.
and Elon.
Yeah.
Screaming, and I'm like, come on, guys.
I
Same team.
I was like, I call him up. I don't FaceTime him, because
Yeah.
that'd be too scary for me.
You call someone on your landline.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could very easily, you could make the case that
He's got a 9 in his number. Piece of shit. He's got a 9 and a 0. I don't want to talk to him.
you could make the case that it's something that humanity is overdue for, too.
I guess.
Well,
It's a purge.
That was a terrible sentence structure, but you could make the case that
You'll live.
All right.
you could make the case that the overall pace of life now, the work week, everything about how we generally conduct our lives now is essentially to the degree that it's not really human anymore. It's not sustainable. It's putting people through an intense amount of stress.
It's killing us.
People, the average life expectancy is declining for the first time in
that
very long time.
That was my point earlier about prosperity going up, and we're not actually doing that well.
So you could make the case that AI could actually be necessary to that degree because it's the thing that will help us evolve to the point that we can contend with this new form of lifestyle that we've
Last piece of the
that we've adapted to, but that genealogically and physically we're not geared to endure. It's why it puts people under such tremendous stress.
Because the people who are creating these technologies have made an environment like that. And then they'll go, well, and then people go, shit, I can't keep up with this. And then they give you, pharmaceutical company makes you sick and then gives you a drug that cures what made you sick in the first place.
Because now we're at the point where we need to keep up with technology.
Yeah, they create an environment where everything is so fast-paced and feels inhuman, or like technologies are created because of that, and then they go, oh, well, you know how you catch up with that? You get a neural link, and then you go, oh, wow, that looks great. I'll be able to like do so much. I'll be able to do so much is your first reaction to that. Does that mean that you'll be able to like think like deeply about a subject, that you're able to feel more compassion? No, the first gut instinct is I'll be a supercomputer. And it's like, fuck that. Like, I want to, like, being a more compassionate person does not equate to me being more efficient.
Well, I don't think they're exclusive necessarily either. I was like, it definitely is a function of, like, I'm always trying to get, I'd use the technology that I do understand to make it so I can get more things done every day of my life, because I don't know how many days I have. And I just, like, with my sense of rationale and the way things are right now, it seems like it's really working for me. Like, so it's hard to not hear these things and to not be more optimistic than pessimistic as I was in the past. But again, it comes to a point in time where it's like you lose so much that you lose your sense of fear about things. And I've definitely gotten to that stage, having gone through some things.
Here's the biggest paradox of this right now is that having access to more information, whether it be through your phone or through your brain, and the Neuralink gives you more access to compassionate ideas. For example, like, you would never have thought to bring up this topic if you didn't find it on the internet, or found the album on your phone or something, and to talk about it, and then to be angry about it.
Sure, but I mean, if someone who's against environmental pollution got to somewhere other than by means of walking, then it's like you could argue that they're contributing
Then they're
to the problem.
a fucking twat.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying. That's my problem with this world. It's just a false equivalency. It's like you have to expend some sort of energy to get somewhere.
Right. I mean,
this still stand for something.
This podcast is going onto an AI-driven platform, whether it's Spotify. Yeah. So it's like, and it will be hopefully recommended to people, and more people will watch it. So I'm not
robots.
Well, yeah. So. Yeah, there is a certain level of hypocrisy when you talk about technology, or
You get a lot of AI views.
Well, wait a second. This is where I thought it was going to be. Can I throw in my one, and we'll just do a quick round? We'll start with Hodrick, because we all talk too much.
Sure.
Here's what I thought AI was about. I thought
is
it was
it
like, there's this cute robot at the department store in Japan. You know which one I'm talking about? And she looks like a real person. I thought it's like, she becomes the lead singer of your
Carol.
band. Yeah, Carol, thank you. So I thought this was more like, Carol joins the band. Would you fuck Carol?
No.
Hodrick goes first. I'm
Hold
not
on.
asking you.
Hold on.
I'm asking the table, but
right.
Hodrick goes first. Would you fuck
Is
Carol?
it about time for the last beer of the
We're there.
episode?
We're landing
This is
the
a
plane.
segue. This is a segue.
We're landing the plane. Thank you,
Yeah.
co-pilot.
Yeah.
Let's condense everything you just said
you want
into
another one,
one
Jesse?
quick sentence.
Yeah,
Hit me again.
So, if Carol the
You take this
robot
one.
joined your band,
Yep.
would you fuck her?
No.
But I mean, she's a looker. Like, she looked nice. Like you, like.
I mean, I'm already taken.
I know, but like
Patrick, you play
assuming
the drums so well.
I'm talking about a broad hypothetical.
How nice of a fleshlight does she have installed?
Like super duper nice. I think we can tell Max's IQ is about 130 or higher.
Would you
Because
like
he's
to
asking the
have
right questions.
coitus with me?
That's what I'm talking about, friends and family. Yeah, her flashlight's amazing.
Yeah, I don't have any desire to have sex with a robot.
But if it was like
you're
Like
just a
what-
Luddite or whatever that fucking
Not
word
even if it was really easy.
oh my god,
Zero effort.
that was yeah.
Just super
I can't
easy.
say that.
Well, that gets into like,
That's my attorney. I advise you against that.
do the robot AI sex bots become so sophisticated that having sex with them would be considered like cheating on your spouse?
Yes. I think it would be. For
I
all
think if they
intents and
I
become
think
that-
it's your intention that makes it not
If-
you,
if-
but
if
the
they're-
person's intention makes it cheating.
If it's a sentient being, whether it's got fucking Lost in Space parts
Obviously,
in there, or like it's got human
you're
organs,
treating
it's
it like
cheating.
another human at the end of the day because you're going P and vg.
Right.
Like you're not going like, oh, I'm just gonna like see what happens if I stick this into a robot socket. Like, like it's not like unless like Full Metal Alchemist or anything like
Right,
that. It's
right.
like it looks like a girl.
What did I miss?
A lot.
You
missed a
You'll
lot.
pick it up. It's
Don't
pretty
worry
quick.
But would you, if Carol the robot joined your band and she came on you, would you fuck her? Would you mess around a little? Like she's clean.
You're not gonna get a computer virus.
All the STDs are programmed out.
I don't know, man.
All them bugs out.
I don't think that's one of those things I could make any comment on until I was actually in that situation.
Until the
you're
robot put its metal claw on your leg and went, "Hey Matt, how are you
Hey,
doing
Matt.
today?"
Well, because it's like
I've always enjoyed you.
because
Yes.
it's literally like, are you?
You don't smell that bad.
Well, it's literally like there's two different types of like sex bots, right? There's like the one that's just a sex toy, that's like another, machine,
Yeah.
or it's or like you said, it's
Carol.
It's Carol.
It's
It's
Carol.
a sentient being who can actually react to your emotions and not just
Right.
and not just react to like a set parameter of things that happen.
Right.
I think it's
At that point, yes.
Wait, so you're
At
saying
the AI point, yes.
I think it's inevitable that people will want to have that degree of separation, that they can have relations with, a non-human entity that is convincing enough.
Yeah, enough.
So, I mean, whether that's facilitated through, an actual physical robot or whether that's through, deep dive, full immersion, VR
Yeah.
kind of, I guess, scenarios.
Yeah. 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 That's a safe way to put it.
Jack in and jack off, as they say.
skirt.
I think that's an inevitability because, again, if we were to assume that history repeats itself, I think it's inevitable that if any form of technology can be assimilated into any kind of sexual implementation, humanity will capitalize on it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, look at all the things we put up our butthole every day. Every day. Race cars and light bulbs, all kinds of shit. I'm like, yeah.
Just out of
So
curiosity.
you're saying long term you would fuck Carol?
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, long term, you'd
All
have
right,
to settle
well,
down with Carol.
So you said yes. You kind of said yes? Or
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
My-
But I'm really lonely. So
So my knee
This is a
jerk
100
my knee jerk
podcast.
reaction would be
fuck.
to say yes. I could
Yeah,
see that
knee-jerk.
happening within the span of my life. I could even see that being like an everyday occurrence where all of a sudden, prostitution becomes obsolete in that
Hey,
sense.
honey, looking for a good time.
Well,
Everything's on
100%.
that menu.
it's also,
That not so much. I think it's once things get to the point that AI human relations are close enough to that of interfacing with an actual human being that people can get to that point that they can let go of that. But then you're also, if AI has evolved to that degree, we're probably also contending with a lot of other issues that pertain with AI being too human-like. And I think that's an inevitability that if things move towards that degree, at what point is AI sentient enough that it needs to be acknowledged as a sentient being and therefore it needs rights?
Right. Which was,
An
again,
entity.
bringing that up at the beginning. It's like, it starts with like, we need to give this thing, like, I don't know, oil, whatever it gets for compensation
Well, I mean,
for
it's-
writing that hit
I feel like
algorithm.
It's choosing to have sex with you. This is going sideways on me.
Okay.
I'm
Well,
saying that
and I also-
if
Yeah,
AI
she's
is-
asking you.
if AI has evolved to the degree that can happen, there's a lot of other things going on in society as a result of those breakthroughs.
I also
That
think
we're
at,
also
I also
contending
think at that point, the Carol that it's also weird to think that Carol is just like a human-like robot that has joined your band.
But she's a great singer.
And is asking you this like rather just like living in a computer and hooked up to the PA.
Well, no, because then it would be like,
Well, this is like the '80s movie version of
Because that's
the AI.
expensive, right? Like that is
for
so
for
expensive.
now, all of this stuff with technology is for now, but it gets exponentially cheaper. So
Yeah.
you can get Carol in your band for
But see,
$500.
Carol's autonomous. She ran away from the people who made her, and she's like, I want to be in an American band. And then she found you guys, and she's like, I like you guys. I want to join your band. And then she's like, Jesse, you're so tall.
What does Carol play?
She plays this.
What's her role in the band?
Trumpet, and she's lead singer. No?
No, I don't know.
She's a great singer.
What if?
She's got a little Adele,
what if-
little
I would-
Aretha.
I
What if she really liked the fact that you weren't into her because she was an AI?
So she
I
tried
was
to tell
playing
me.
hard. I was playing hard to get.
I have no feelings, so I love
like-
how you neg me.
She likes how non-connected you are to the,
Wow.
to the
so
technology.
that would work. So it's like I'm not
You
interested.
remind her of her dad. This is getting
Carol as a
bad.
father.
It's getting bad. So let me just say I'd fuck Carol and be done with it.
I'm kind of in the same boat as Matt. Like I can't.
Eventually.
I can't. No, not eventually. I can't say for sure whether I would or not. I have a feeling though, if I would, then I would feel like great shame would be brought upon myself.
Doubt it.
That's silly. Thank you, Hodrick.
No, I don't know.
Doubt it.
I
Press X.
think it was something that I would do once, and then I would probably be like, "This is stupid." Like like literally all of like my taste. So it's like, why wouldn't I want to just find another person?
You taste
Carol's
being
sick.
humans, or yeah, no, like she's like seriously, she's like thick
Okay.
beyond all belief. She's like
So
like
I'm gonna tie a
you bounce a
point
quarter
into
off of that.
So using like cyberpunk as an example, that's a real thing that people contend with within that world of this new video game Cyberpunk 2077 is the idea of these. Well, they call them dolls. They're not necessarily like humanoid AIs. They're actual people. But the idea is these are essentially brothels, for lack of a better word, where these dolls are essentially uploaded with a profile of all of your neural net data, so they know essentially everything about you.
Right.
Or rather, the AI knows everything about you. So the
Right.
doll is essentially a human being that is being blacked out during this exchange. So their consciousness is essentially rendered inert, and there's an AI that takes over the body and is analyzing all this information to come up with like the most ideal way to seduce you
Right.
and to give you like your most ideal sexual experience.
Right.
And the idea is that the actual person taking part, the doll themselves, is not actually part of the experience.
Yeah.
They're just facilitating the experience through their body, and the entire exchange is being taken place with two humans, but one is an AI entity that you disclose all of your private information to, and the second the experience is over, they have the doll has no recollection of anything that took place.
Right.
And before we ever get to that point, I could see that also being a potential, landmark that people could hit is before we get to the point that, human robot interfacing becomes commonplace.
That's not what I call it when I do stuff with Carol.
But that
call it making
poses
love.
another point because that could have connotations outside of sexual experience too, where you can have truly confidential experiences with another person that's being facilitated by an AI.
That's kind of
It's
yeah.
you're only gonna freak him out more.
really
So that was another part of cyberpunk where it wasn't just necessarily sexual experiences.
Yeah.
It was just whatever is going to fulfill you emotionally the most.
Right. And I think that for a lot of people that I think anything, broadening it out, you see in like Black Mirror, Cyberpunk, anything that's technology based, you will see that anything that's come out, I'd say in the last 5 years or around that time, you'll see manifest in one form or another. Where before it's like, if you saw something like, say, Back to the Future,
Or an
And-
approximation or bastardization.
Yeah.
Don't stop or we'll die.
Well, yeah, it will either come about exactly that way, or it will be a version
old
of
lady
that,
said.
and more accurately depicted than ever, as opposed to like if you saw something sci-fi, say like 30 years ago, because we know we kind of see where this is going, right? So I still think with all of that, that's going to sound really appealing to people, and they're going to want to just go for that base impulse of like, that's what people are thinking with this Neuralink shit. Along with being a supercomputer, there's some people that are thinking like, I want to have some crazy experience through this.
I think we do, and I think there's a lot about, the concept of expanding human cognitive capability that renders that outside of our ability to perceive. So, God, how do I want to phrase this?
Gently.
Before you do, I would say this. In the same way that we've signed up for apps, I know I'm doing this the whole podcast.
I didn't like when you started. You were here before you used to do
So
this.
before you do that, I think what it all boils down to for me is I think the thing that people
How
are
dare
gonna garner the most prosperity from, I'll use that word in quotations, is the idea of the enhancement of human I/O, the amount of information that can travel in and out of the human brain and the way through which that's facilitated. So the big issue right now in the world as a result of cell phones is there's a lot of differing science about this, but there is a lot of trepidation about the idea of outsourcing certain practices and methodologies to our phone is having an effect of atrophy on the brain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So the idea that we're outsourcing certain cognitive tasks, degrees of importance to our phone that are affecting our cognitive capabilities to retain certain amounts of information, right? So comprehension is becoming an issue. We basically have this gigantic fire hose of information being just jetted at each and every one of us all the time. And as a result of that, our comprehension is at an all-time low. And that's why the general academic scores of the U.S., for example, are going down steadily.
Information does not equal intelligence.
No, it's
Access,
comprehension.
and access to information does not equal intelligence either.
So the problem is we have way
There's
more
also,
information.
school funding
Yeah.
issues involved
Well,
in that.
sure.
So all of it basically comes down to comprehension. Like when you think about the best teachers that you had in your school days, the people that had the most impact on you, or the people that you at least learned the most from, are the people who facilitated your ability to comprehend the information that they're delivering the best.
So patient with you.
absolutely.
Right? So comprehension is the key, and comprehension is also the thing that we hold people the least accountable for in school, right? The idea is once the information is delivered, it's completely up to the student as to whether they comprehend the information or not, right?
I would leave it at
Not
that.
everywhere, not everywhere.
Not everywhere.
For the most part, they just leave it at
But
that.
when you go to your general public school, the idea is the information is presented to you and all responsibility falls on you as to whether you comprehend, record, or essentially, even just pay attention
Pretty
to
much.
the presentation.
Right.
And for a lot of kids, that's never going to be an ideal situation for them to find themselves in. So
Right.
for me, when I think of the idea of direct interface of information in an educational sense, you remove those variables that are so frustrating for kids about school, is the idea that presentations are too fast or they're not geared in a way that's easy for them to comprehend. They get behind, they start getting in their own heads.
And then it's the kid's fault.
They lose their sense of self-image, or they develop negative views about their self-image, and comprehension goes even lower because they start thinking less of themselves.
Sure. And I would agree with kids going through school, there's a lot of factors with that. And I think our whole education system is completely ass backwards in just the concept of how things are taught, But I would.
Bass backwards.
It is. Yeah, thank you.
Well, the reason for that being that
yeah.
we have metrics by which to, approximate comprehension
Right.
with the current school system, and yet almost nothing about the methodology by which that information is delivered changes in relation to that information.
Right, but I would argue too that
That's a very good point.
this is a problem for adults too, not kids currently going
Not
through
just
school.
stupid children, man.
Right.
You care about kids. a lot.
Well, that's the
college
biggest
classes and
problem is
everything,
there are
too.
so many incredibly bright and intelligent kids who are just being thrown into the wrong situation where they're not primed to thrive, or they develop an unhealthy view of their own abilities to the point that they end up hampering themselves for their entire lives because
Right.
they develop the
Sounds like
belief.
the generation I grew up in.
And an
Well,
unhealthy
yeah, because people
relationship with
develop
learning.
the belief that they're not good at taking tests, they're not good at school, and once
Right.
you have those kind of beliefs, you're gonna have a really hard time
I mean,
pushing through.
Yeah. It's like our culture doesn't emphasize, like, it's not like it's cool to be fucking smart either. So kids cotton on to that shit too.
Definitely.
And I was the first person to be like, okay, I learned by 3rd grade, I'm never gonna be cool enough for these fucking twats. So I might as well just be as smart as I can be and stop pretending to fail a class so I could make that one friend with a cool t-shirt.
And
feel
that
better.
even has negative
I was like, fuck that
aspects to
fool.
it, too.
And a lot of other people don't do that, but they need to fucking do that.
That was my approach too. And then when I got to college and I wasn't dealing
get more
so
knowledge.
much.
College.
Well, I wasn't dealing with people so much in
Lower
an
your voice,
inter.
Ron.
You know, when you get to college and you take very, very large.
Tracts of land.
You take courses that involve
Tracks of land.
much larger student bases than anything you experience in
Right.
high school.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's a situation in which if you're in a particular class that's being graded on a bell curve and you're that one guy in class that everybody knows is like the
Jesus.
overachiever and is
Yep.
doing well,
Yep.
everybody hates you for
Yep.
that. Because sometimes you're the guy that's the reason that somebody who would have passed the class failed.
Well, in the words of the great Hubert Selby Jr., fuck them.
Fuck 'em.
Fuck them.
So-
Seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
What else you got?
So David,
Yeah.
What part of our future AI overlords are you most looking forward to?
Dude, I just fucking love integration. I really, really do. I just love the ease of things, especially when the transition is seamless. When one day you're just introduced to this thing and you go, oh, this is weird.
I'm just shaking my head. Just shaking my head. Wow. With an audible.
Yeah.
Would you
My boy.
consider would you consider video calling to be a seamless transition?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's all shit that when it's introduced at first we go like, oh, that's weird, and I'll probably not use that because I'm already doing the thing that is easy enough for me. I don't need to do that. And then as soon as somebody just shows you, oh no, it's just that, and you go, oh fuck, and then eventually you get to a point where you're like, I don't know how I was doing anything without this.
Okay.
And then it's just
That's a
part
little
of your
different
shit.
than what I was thinking. I know I've brought up, video calling with all of you guys. It's the best example I can think of like a technology that humanity romanticized for 100 years. The idea of being able to, that was a huge aspect of the
Yeah,
Jetsons.
talk to somebody across
yeah.
the fucking world. and see
Jetsons,
what they
Star
Being able
Trek,
to-
James
yeah,
Bond, all that shit.
Being able to talk to somebody over your TV, much less a phone.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you
yeah.
watch the Jetsons,
fucking
they don't
pocket.
have anything that looks like a cell phone.
Yeah, it's all over the TV.
Talking to
So
I think it was Star Trek first, right? The like
Transponders with like a fucking.
the like TV.
Yeah.
I think it was, but yeah, all of that stuff.
just that general idea that this is something that humanity, like flying cars, romanticized forever. And then all of a sudden, when it actually happened,
Penicillin.
it arrived
penicillin.
it arrived to no fanfare whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because everything around it had evolved so much that it seemed like, oh, video calling, that's a byproduct of everything else.
right.
And so humanity didn't celebrate once the first Skype call could be made.
No, they complained about it
Well,
because
they had
I
the
couldn't hear you
technology-
properly. Yeah, because we're
They
a
had
bunch
the
of spoiled
technology
assholes.
demonstrated at the World's Fair in 1964 or something. And people were like, oh, wow, that's commercially available? That's so great. But nobody really felt like they fucking needed it.
Right.
Yeah, there hasn't been any like major technology that I can think of within the last 15 years that has made the world like just kind of stop and go, oh fuck, the game just changed.
To
Stop,
me-
collaborate, and listen.
To me, that is low-level
Takes us back to the brand
implementation
invention.
of
Hey.
AI technology. where you start
What's
seeing
that
it in
sound?
things as base
AI is
as
gonna bring us all down.
like this isn't going to make sense to everybody, but even something as simple as like the BIOS of your computer can be enhanced by AI. That's incredible to me. I know it's not incredible to most people, but just like
Don't know what it is.
remember how all of a sudden like Bluetooth 5 became a thing?
Yeah.
Again, like to no fanfare.
Not-
People
not-
don't really care about it.
I don't
but-
keep up with that kind of stuff, so I don't.
So
I don't
like
remember
the
exactly
fifth integration of Bluetooth has been like incredible. Like the amount of connectability
Yeah, it's super
that
dope.
that devices well Wi-Fi 6 now, like mesh based
Yeah, that's cool.
No,
networking.
believe me, I fucking love Bluetooth.
No, I
and
know,
stuff.
I
You know,
know,
what- you
I
know
know
what
you
in-
do.
You know what invention did do that for the world, and I'm not an Apple person, but the iPhone was an invention that came out and the world
That's
was
why
like,
I said 15 years.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why I said 15 years. I
So-
was starting at the release of the iPhone in 2005, 6, and then everything from there, all social medias, all of that shit has just been
So-
like.
well, you know your dates better than me.
I guess the point I'm making is that even every
Don't you think
day,
CRISPR is a big step forward?
That drawer in your fridge?
Yeah.
dude,
Davey,
that's
go
a
home.
whole that's a whole other can of worms.
Wow, he threw you out before me.
It's just the base
happen?
level of computational power that's available in even sub $20 items available nowadays.
It's
like
insane.
like even just Bluetooth radios for cars right now have CPUs in them that are infinitely more powerful than what the military had, 50, 60,
Right,
70 years
and that
ago.
Being able to buy a Raspberry Pi that's like
Yeah.
more powerful than the computer, than like my tower computer that I had in like middle school.
But
Right.
But general people just see those things as everyday items, just having more use cases and becoming more capable.
Right. Well, and that's why I've said for now this whole time, because we're talking about all of this stuff. But technology gets more available and just exponentially cheaper as time goes on. And
Well, it's Moore's law.
Right. And so that's the thing is like all of this, well, that's where it's
Julianne
at
Moore?
for now.
Julianne Moore?
no, Roger Moore.
That's a tough
He-
call. That's a tough call.
Yeah.
For your
The-
eyes only.
I mean,
For your AIs only.
Hey! Hi.
I don't want to stretch outside of my realm of understanding, but just
Knock that gavel. Let's get the fuck out. All
the
right.
principle of, the exponential curve of
Yeah.
growth of technology, that every year computer chips become twice or more efficient and half as expensive.
Right.
And we've been moving along this steady curve forever. We hit an exponential spike. Now we're kind of at a plateau a little bit because
about
of
to happen.
manufacturing
Explosion.
standards, but it's about to blow up in a really, really
It's
big way.
gonna be
And
so sick.
most likely, the thing that's going to facilitate that, to me anyway, I could be completely wrong. I think the thing that's going to facilitate that is a new age, right? Like when we think of ages of humanity throughout history, usually they're tied to some kind of resource, right? Like we have the Iron Age, the Bronze Age,
Chicken age.
the Industrial Revolution, and now it's getting outside of those things. But then we have new component materials that all of a sudden can break through all those plateaus.
True.
Like it seems like it's likely that processor technology is going to move on from being purely silicon based to either graphene based or a hybrid
about
of
this.
silicon and graphene.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, supposedly, that's going to introduce a pretty huge bump in the overall capabilities of computer processors. It's also going to affect anything that involves using printed circuit boards or processors. It's going to revolutionize anything involving like the thermal conductivity of a device, like computers being able to run much cooler,
Yeah,
all
shit's about to
kinds of
get
things.
way faster
yeah.
and way more efficient.
Houses that don't
Weirder.
need wiring.
Yes, but efficient.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love efficiency.
Yeah, sure.
You like wires.
Essentially,
Sometimes.
essentially in the future, we're all going to become that G.I. Joe meme video where he's a computer and he's asking the kids to stop all the downloading.
Would you download a house?
You would
would
download
download
a fettuccine Alfredo. That was one I saw the other
We'll
day.
all be a Zordon to our own Power Rangers.
Oh wow.
Good.
Well, and
That's deep.
I would leave it on that positive note because I think everybody likes Power Rangers.
That's a good
That I
religious
do.
reference.
Yeah, it is. Good. Have you heard the good word about
Oh yeah, no, gospel according to the
powerful
Yellow
Rangers?
Ranger.
Yeah.
So I open up the door to like potentially fucking with everybody's childhood, and like that's where we draw the line. Like, don't you fuck with my Power Rangers?
No, I needed a way to safely land back into LAX, and I figured Power Rangers was a good way to do it.
Yes.
I mean, bringing it back to music, I mean, I think we can all agree that Jesse is the one who lost here.
Well, thankfully, because of this wonderful
Court record
platform we are
reflects.
with YouTube, there's plenty of tutorials on how to convert vans into outdoor apartments. So there's always option D.
There you go.
Hit the escape route.
Sweet van life.
Paying cash only.
Yeah, cash only,
Cash
van
only.
life.
You guys take cash here?
Yeah. You don't need cash.
Oh,
if
you
can
have to
grow-
wear shoes inside? Never mind.
You grow your own food. Ugh, get away from me. That's what it's going to be in the future.
Well, I think one thing you can say is for anybody who's, young and coming up in the world is that if you're gonna venture into the world of, the development of artificial intelligence, that's probably as pretty close to a safe bet
Suck
of
up.
occupation as you could have.
For real.
Like if you're looking to go into that field, it's gonna be pretty fruitful for a while.
And if you see Jesse on the street, you best cross.
Yeah. Don't offer him a brochure.
I was going to say, if you see me with a man with a robotic arm and a lady that looks like Sarah Connor, run away.
Yeah, run away.
Run far away.
They're coming for
Now,
you.
how do you feel about that?
What?
Like the idea of, artificial intelligence being incorporated as like a byproduct of like prosthetics, things like that. Where maybe it doesn't exist at like the actual cognitive level.
I think that it will help a lot of people and it's going to be great, and that's going to be the way that people use that to be integrated into our lives.
Say you lost
Yeah.
your arm in an accident,
Yeah.
and now you can't play bass.
Some-
But the only way to play bass again is to fucking
Yeah,
link
Neuralink and blah, 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 blah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you replace it with the Kucha
Yeah,
robot?
you're so clever. Like, I never thought of an argument of, what if you look like an asshole for disagreeing with me about AI and technology?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
just
yeah.
go, sure.
But
I'll
what
do
if-
that.
But what if all the bullies from your high school were controlling your arm and making you punch yourself?
Dude, okay, so let's just say this. What if somebody could hack into your fucking brain in the same way that you get hacked in, like, your computer gets hacked?
I
have it.
think that's the most valid concern.
No, that
Yeah,
that
You
is
just
that
didn't
really
spend
is.
enough money
It's-
on the
I just,
Firewalls.
on the Google virus.
I think Jesse,
firewall.
it's an inevitability of that technology that will be a concern.
there will always be crooked people that will try to do shit like that. And there will be, now we have identity theft of, oh, you tried to open up a credit card in my name. There's going to be legitimate identity theft in the future.
But I think a lot of
stole
people.
my face.
I think
Dude,
a lot
they
of
already
people,
steal your face.
They
Like
steal your
deep
thoughts.
fakes and shit. Like they already, yeah.
I think
we
a
can
lot
add-
of people still feel that way.
Someone
Like,
could
a
steal
lot
your
of older people
consciousness.
still feel that way about having computers now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
My
luckily
grandma
we did
still
before
just
we go to work.
refuses to use Amazon for that reason.
Good.
So can we end on there will always be crooked Schurenberg people to do crooked shitberg things?
Yes.
Schurenberg?
Shitbird. Yeah.
Are we over on that?
Yeah, what? Like,
Jeez.
Oh, yes. Yes,
Episode's
Dr.
Well, I mean,
Stein.
we can keep going. I don't know what time are we at.
Oh, no, we're good.
We're good. We're good.
Yeah,
we're at
you're
2
out of your
hours.
mind.
All right.
I'm
No,
done
but
with
we
this
can still
subject
keep talking
forever.
Yes, we
Yeah.
absolutely can still keep talking as-
together.
Forever.
Jesse, why don't you thank the nice people?
Yeah. And the robots,
Don't
too.
forget to smash the like button and hit subscribe and
Matt,
hit
Matt.
that bell so you can know anytime we upload new roundtable episodes to
Oh.
the Sonic City Council
Yes.
Yes.
YouTube channel.
Yay.
Don't rely on your AI robots to do
Yeah.
that for you.
Yeah. Hit that bell on
If
your
a
own.
robot horse leads you to plunder.
See, I said it so that Jesse and Max and Davey can't be held accountable
Yeah.
for shilling out their own YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm proud to call you my son.
That was that a workman's comp situation.
Your Honor, you can clearly see he stuck his hand underneath my gavel.
Oh well. Good night.
Goodbye.
Oh, yeah, bye, Al.
City Council was created by Jesse Davidson and Davey Sipes and engineered by Max Taylor at Desert Sound Studio in Palmdale, California. Thank you to Disaster Cabinet for the outro music. Intro music written by Max Taylor. Sonic City Council is produced in association with Amps Music Academy and the Showcase Venue. For more information, visit theshowcasevenue.com.